Well, hello, everyone, and welcome to On the Count podcast. I'm your host, Pedro Lugo, and today my co-host, Keone Stevens.
I'm happy to
Uh,
be with you again.
all right. How's it going today?
It's going good.
Um,
You know
all
what,
right.
Pedro? I'm
Yes.
glad we're doing this episode because last episode, episode one, you did prison reform, and we thank Dr. Mark Jones and activist Harold Ford for joining us on that, talking about prison reform. But of course, when we do any of these shows on Counter Productions, they always ask, what makes this person, which would be you, the what makes them the subject matter expert, or at least a person who's qualified to speak on the topic in what we're talking about on the count is everything involving the prison system, jail, prisoners, inmates, ex-cons, cons, and all those things wrapped into one. So dive a little into that.
Well, sure. Let me give you a little bit about my background. My background. I spent 27 years in the Federal Bureau of Prisons. I retired as a lieutenant, which gave me the opportunity to run the institution many of times. Many times I was the lead supervisor, especially in the late hours, once everybody leaves the institution. But in those 27 years, I gained so much knowledge of how the system works. The opportunities I had were incredible because I started as an officer. And as an officer, I did other jobs, moved into um, I continued to grow. I even became a counselor for a while. I was a counselor, a correctional counselor for quite a bit, and dealt with inmates in a different matter other than just being correctional. And that gave me an opportunity to look behind uh, different doors in the job. But not just that, then as a lieutenant, have to run the security and the safety of the staff and also the inmates, the prisoners that we are accountable for. We are there to also maintain their safety as well and being able to assist them in many things. As a counselor, I learned so much in how the system works and what is it that makes it a little bit different? The Federal Bureau of Prisons or the federal system is totally different from the state system as well. And then you also have the county systems. They are totally different and they have their place in situations are very, very different. And every prison, the federal prison, is not the same. I was fortunate where I worked. I worked in here in North Carolina where I'm at. I worked in Butner for my career. I did get to go to other prisons and worked in other prisons as well. But my main hub was Butner. And Butner for us was kind of unique because it gave us a different perspective of how the system worked. At Butner's, we have a lot of same issues that other prisons have, but we also have found a way to be able to deal with those situations. What to make it unique about Butner, I had a lot of inmates. I got some great stories at some point in time, but great, really, really great stories. But some stories were very fascinating to me because I will have inmates that will come from penitentiaries, and they were really these rough gangster guys, and they will come in, and the way we dealt with the inmates in our facility was our intent to change their behavior, not for them
So
to remain the same.
you know what, you just said that, and of course, didn't mean to cut you off. And it's very important because we talk about it all the time. Is what is prison for? What is jail for? Of course, it's to receive your punishment, but we've been taught that it's supposed to be also a real rehabilitation, a place of rehabilitation. And one of the things we talked about in episode one, prison reform, is you have people who go to jail, various crimes, but we're just talking in general. We're not saying if someone's a serial killer that they should have sympathy and come out and be able to do everything else. So let's get that straight. We're
Right.
just talking about commonly people who go to jail for whatever reason, assault and battery as an 18-year-old or a 19-year-old, or hell, even as a 30-year-old who's never been in trouble. So you go to jail, you serve your time, you should be rehabilitated, and then when you go back into society, it's hard to get back into society when you've got this over your head and people are holding it against you because you've done something, but now you're supposed to be rehabilitated. And so I can imagine when you're sitting down there counseling someone, but also knowing what they have to face when they get out. It's not just counseling them about how to deal with what's going on right now in prison. You're also counseling them because you know what's coming for them when they get out. Am I close with
Yeah,
that?
you're correct. What being a counselor gave me was an insight. I had a line of questions
Mhm.
that I would, as a lieutenant, I had to many times sign and authorize for the inmate to when they were exiting or leaving the prison. So
Mhm.
I already had some questions that I already had in my mind that I would ask them just before they left, and I would have this. There's like 3 or 4 questions that I would ask them, and by the response of the end to me, their answer, it will give me the insight. I'll be like, "Well, I hate to tell you this, but I'll leave the light on for you because you're coming back." Okay. And then I had some other ones that I would ask them the same questions, and I'd be like, "Well, you've done a great job. Wish you the best. I hope not to see you again. If I do see you, be outside of this confinement is behind, the other side of these walls." But it takes time, and the thing is that we don't have the opportunity sometimes to do is prepare the inmates. We do offer them different venues, and the federal prison system and also the state system does the same, but we don't teach them how to maximize the use. Okay, some of them do. Some of them is like a switch at some point in time. It turns on, and they'll be like, "Wow, I'm not going back to doing what I was doing because I'm in here. I'm doing 10, 15, 20 years or, whatever time they're doing." And they realize this is not it. Okay. So this is not really it. And they have to make that switch, but we also give them the opportunity. One thing that I really did as a counselor is being able to afford them the opportunity. I will open my doors. I will tell them my door's open. Come and ask. If you don't ask, you shall not, you're not going to receive. But I
Mhm.
also laid out some breadcrumbs as well. And
Yeah.
I had that great opportunity. And when I have the inmates, when I will receive inmates coming in from the streets,
Mhm.
I have programs that I will tell them. I'm thinking about one young kid that came from California. He comes to us and he has a little bit of an attitude. Well, I'm not saying you got to do this. This is what are we going to do? And this is how we're going to do. And I laid out exactly what they were going to be doing, how they're going to be doing it, who they're going to see the next day, where they're going to sign up for education, who they want to talk. And what I made a point for me while I was a counselor, I would come and check on those guys. The guys, even some of the guys in the unit were like, "What are you doing down here?" "I'm checking on you." "Well, you don't have to." "Yes, I do have to do this." I didn't have to, but I felt the
Well, you know
need to
what?
do that.
That that makes a I think that right there makes a big impact because everybody can talk the talk, right? Hey, you need to do A, B, C, and D, and then just send you on your way. But when they see you, you're on the way home. They know your schedule. They know you're on the way home, but you're stopping by and say, "Hey, how's everything going? How are you doing? Are you following up?" That's going to impact a lot of people. I know a lot of people just think you go in jail and you sit in a cell, you get fed, you do some work, and then you go back to the cell. But like you're saying, there are programs in jails now. Either you're self motivated to go and take up those programs, or there are people like you who go a little bit of the extra mile to get them in there. And that brings me to our next question. If you could, because I know you have of 27 years. I mean, heck, if you work for 5 years, 7 days, you've got stories. I would like you to give us one of two scenarios. Can you tell us a story, of course, leaving names out and all of that and certain particulars? I want one each. One of a guy that you worked with that you knew could make it, but for some reason it just didn't happen. Whether that's the programs didn't help or what he faced when he got out or just certain things. And then give me one of that person that you just knew from the moment you were helping, like it's not going to sink in.
Oh, some people are just not going to sink in.
Yeah.
I had one guy that I kept working with him. I tried, but um, he's actually was from North Carolina, and boy, it just didn't sink in. It just a switch won't turn off, and
Mhm.
it just like all he could think about was just being a better criminal. Really, that's what his switch
Mhm.
was. It wasn't trying to make better as you were in the system and taking advantage and that everything that was given to him. It was just it would not switch. He would go to school, he just don't do anything. He'd come back and he would just not get it. You could say, "Oh, get in line," but it's not about getting in line. It's about making that switch. Everybody gets in line. You can get anybody in line.
Yeah.
Okay, we have whether they like it or not, we have the command, we have the power. I can, we can do certain things, and you're gonna get in line. But that doesn't mean they're gonna learn and accept and make
Right.
that switch. So a lot of them don't make that switch. I remember one story, and of an older guy. He was in his 50s, and he finally got out.
Mhm.
Um, Going through the visiting, I saw him several times. I met his wife, and she was very nice. And I didn't know this, but she worked in Raleigh, and she was a Chick-fil-A manager. She had a great job. And I ran into her like a year and a half later after I knew he was out, and I asked her, "So, hey, how you doing? And how is such and such doing? How's it going for him?" And she just gave me this look like,
No. Oh.
I was like, "No." I said, he could not make it. He's back in prison. I'm like, wow, he had done already 20 years and he could not adapt. Some people can adapt. Then I also have some great success stories. I have several really good success stories. One is one right now that I know of. We remained in touch, and I did a lot of work with him. Did a lot of work with several inmates, but him specifically, we began to speak, and I've been working. We began to work. We didn't help him through a program that I put together, and the program had it was a 6 month program. We did a lot of things. We did a lot of scenarios. We did a lot of plays and how are you going to deal with certain situations and all this. And right now, he's been out 10 years, successful,
Mm.
has a very good job, has 3 kids that look just like him. um, but 3 kids. And I will tell you, he is, as a father, he's a really awesome father. He
Mhm.
takes care of his kids the way he does. He says, "This is not what was given to me when I was growing up." He has a great background story. His
Mhm.
story from how he landed in prison and everything is great, but that will be for another day. But
Right.
he's
We're
been.
gonna get y'all to it because we're probably gonna have him on, so we're gonna
I,
want to save
I,
it.
I'm
Yeah.
I'm looking forward to that because he has a great story.
Mhm.
Um, and he's very humble nowadays. And that's how I met him. He was very humble. He was looking for help. He was looking to make that change. He wanted that change. He's been out 10 years. He's made that change. And it's nothing that really will derail him from that change for him to land back in prison. So he's doing everything, but it was a switch. He tells me himself it was a switch. Then I had to put everything in order and what I wanted to do, and had to surround myself with good people and the people that wanted to help me. And he has done really really good. I also had another success story from another kid while in prison, and he always thought, well, his family had put him down for me. They always down talked to him. They told him he was dumb, he was stupid, he couldn't do this, he couldn't do that. And he was getting frustrated about school because in the federal system, you have to get your GED. We
Mhm.
encourage you, we send you to school, we make you get your GED. And we spoke, and I said, well, I want you to get your GED. This is what we're going to do. We're going to work on it. And he was like, well, okay, great. He went and took some classes. He was doing okay, but he was not doing as good as he wanted to. He was getting frustrated. So I had in prison we got all kind of people. So I had a couple, a doctor and some people that, they were very smart. And I say, listen, this is what I need from you guys. I need you to tutor this young man.
And you're talking about actual prisoners because there's all kinds of people from every walks of life that end up in jail, doctors,
Oh,
lawyers. And so you went
yes.
to some of the prisoners who had doctorate degrees and master's degrees and say, hey, look, I need you to help this guy out.
And that's what I did. And they did. At first, they were kind of reluctant, but listen, I need you to do this. So they
Mhm.
took this young man under their wing. We make sure that he was doing everything he needed. And just before he left prison, because he was doing 5 years, that was a sentence that I can remember. Before he left, he got his GD.
Mm.
He got his GD. And I remember he just cried when he got his
Wow.
voucher, his old, man, I got it. I know. I thought it was dumb, but I said, no, you're not dumb. It's just
No,
everybody expects you to learn the same way everybody did. That's why we did what we did, and
well,
to me, that was success.
when you say something to somebody long enough, they tend to believe it. It's just like any lie out there. We're not going to get political, but any lie out there. If you say something enough times and it's regurgitated, it becomes fact, and that's just a thing. So do you agree? We've got to get better of separating those people who can and want to be rehabilitated. Now, some people say, well, how do you decide that? You worked in there for 20 years. I've never worked in prison, and I know there are people you're like, you're going to be in here for the rest of your life. They're just like you said, that's you can see in their eyes that switch isn't going to turn on, whether it's a cold-blooded killer, whether it's somebody who's just increasingly violent and that's the route they've chosen and they're not detouring from those ones that you have that want to be rehabilitated and want to go back into society and make their life better. We got to get better at separating those two. You think?
And we tried to do that because what we have a it's an accountability, not just accountability. When you go into prison, you have certain points that are given to you for prior crimes or whatever that you have done in the past. If you have education, if you don't have education, so it's a point system they also give you. They'll give you a
Oh,
max. Yeah, there are different because some people don't ever go inside the prison. They go to a camp,
mhm.
which doesn't have a fence around it or walls or anything like that. A prison camp also is a little bit more open, even though it is still prison. Then you have the low security, you have medium security, and you have high security, and also you have max security. And those are different classifications that we give the inmates. Now, is that a perfect system? No, it is not, because you're at the camp. It doesn't mean that you may not end up at a different security for different things that you might do at the camp. You never have been caught and you're just a criminal and you just don't want to get away from that way of thinking, but you never got caught, so you kind of points don't really will put you inside of a prison, or your crime was not sufficient for you to give you enough points to say, well, all right, he's going to go in the low security, which mainly that's where a lot of people end up. And being there, at the camp, although you working your way out. Now, also, like I said, working your way out, some people come in as high security, they work their way down to medium security, low security in the camp. They can do that as well. All depends on the time in the system, how well they doing, if they're doing programming, they stay out of trouble for the time they're there, and if their crime allows them. Sometimes your crime, the minimum you will ever see is a low security type of prison. You will never see a camp because your crime was, if you were a bank robber and it was an armed bank robbery, most likely you will never go to a camp. Most likely that's same because everything changes. There's nothing ever set on, because somebody can get a phone call on a call and say, well, I want this person, and things would change. I've seen a lot of things changes politically, so
I don't
that
know.
can happen.
I don't know what it looks like now, but when I lived in Miami, I want to say the time I lived in Miami in the 2006-7 time frame, my roommate, he still is, I think. I don't think he's retired yet. Was a federal prison guard, And it was next to my reserve base that I used to go to when I switched from active duty to reserves before I came back to active duty. And the federal prison was next door. And so I wanted to work out, but our gym was already always too full. He said, just come to our gym. I was like, what do you mean just come to our gym? And so I drove over there. There's no gate. There's no gate guard. There's nothing. I just drove on. I'm seeing prisoners just walk by me. I go in the weight room. I'm lifting weights. Prisoners walking in, and I'm like, I'm uncomfortable. What's going on? I was like, because I had no idea what it was like. And then I asked him, I said, why is this so open? And Lexi's like, John, Keone, the people here, they already know that gate's open. They go out of that gate, they're going to end up somewhere way worse than here. So we don't have that problem here. Of course, we've got to do our security and everything else. But he's like, that's not the main problem here. No one's leaving. It was also really interesting because Noriega was at that prison while he was there. But it just baffled me at how open and relaxed this prison was.
It is like that. That's the camp. That's the camp in Miami. I know all about it. I know where it's located. And it's like that. What you saw probably if you were using the gym, what you saw was the orderlies come in to clean up the gym because that is their job. It's one of the jobs. They come in and clean the facilities out over there. And it's open. They can't walk in and out. And like you said, they don't leave. Once you leave and you're not accountable and we can't find you, you're considered an escapee. And we give you about 12 hours. If we can't find you, then you go into the marshal's list that you has escaped. That's why sometimes we hear on the news, inmate escaped federal prison. No, he just walked out. he just left. He could have walked out, and while at the camp, there's nothing that we can do about to prevent them to leave. Somebody can stop in the car, pick them up, and leave, and there's nothing we can do about it because they are called out custody, so they can't leave. We can't stop them. We do provide security. We can't have accountability, but if they leave, they're known. Now,
I know that sounds weird to people. They're like, wait a minute, if that's the case, why didn't everybody just leave? But like we were just saying, they know that if they leave, they're going to end up somewhere worse than where they are. So
if they leave and which they will get caught, they will end up either at a medium security prison. They will never again work their way back to what they had at the camp and the facilities and the little bit more at ease kind of life when you're in prison, because the camp gives you affordability to have a little bit of being more relaxed. There are different programs offered. You have also programs that can take you into the town and the city. You become a driver for other inmates to take them to different places if they need to get to the hospital. They have different things they have available to them that inmates behind the fence, behind those doors, behind those, they don't have, and they don't want to lose that. A lot of them don't want to lose that. And a lot of them have worked their way down, so they want to have that in their record as well because it looks good later on when they present their case, if they have to present their case to a judge and hey, this is what I've done. I just want to go back home. I want to be able to reduce my sentence. So they want to be able to work certain things. That is good. Now, everybody does not take advantage of that. Everybody does not do what they're supposed to do. Some people just walk away. Some institutions, we've had those camps where the drug and the drinking and prostitution and everything becomes prevalent. And we try to figure out how to curtail it. That's the other problem. But it does happen. It does come about. But I will tell you, the majority of them will do what is right just to be able to remain at that style prison. It's we always told the funny thing about being down in Miami, the fence went down to one doing Hurricane Andrew.
Yeah.
Andrew. And the inmates were not running out the door. We were like, okay, they're just going to help us put the fence back up.
Listen, we had more problems tracking down zoo animals after Hurricane Andrew. The prisoners were the last were the last of our worries. It was the zoo animals that we couldn't get a hold to. Let's get into some common myths. Because I know there's some common myths about prison that, and we could do a whole 2 hour, we could do a whole
Yeah.
mini series on that, but we're just going to touch some. And before you get into some of the myths that you want to go over, I want to talk about the myth of, because the movies is what creates most of these myths, right? We go and watch these movies, and you mostly worked in what is solitary confinement like, and is there different levels of solitary confinement? Because we've all seen the movie with the guy in a little closet space with no sunlight for 2 years of solitary.
Well, everybody think of solitary confinement, which is not solitary confinement.
Okay.
Is usually is a big housing unit, and really what it is a prison, is the jail within the prison. All right, and it's usually done in order to be able to control and contain certain behaviors. If you continuously break the rules and you don't, we have the rules, we have things, and you get charged, you get certain things taken away. I had inmates that, well, once they break the rules, they get a shot, which is just what we called it. A shot is nothing but you when you break the rules. A shot is you get it, and you get presented into the housing unit staff, and we take discipline on it. It's a disciplinary matter, and we can do a number of things with that. We can remove you from using your phone. We can take the canteen away. We can have you remain in the unit. We can take away certain facilities, and that you have for you some privilege. Now, if that doesn't work, we can give you time in what is called the special housing unit, because this is just to curtail the behavior. The special housing unit is usually the cell is 12 by 8, and usually it has 2 beds in it, and right there you have your sink with your toilet and everything together, just like you see it in the movies. But you have access to recreation. We give you an hour recreation every day.
Mhm.
You have your 3 meals. You have still access to books. We do checks. We do every 30 minutes. We have to come by and check on you, make sure everything
Ooh,
is, yes,
every 30
is
minutes.
for us is every 30 minutes. We have to make rounds and make sure. My job as a special housing lieutenant, which I ran a special housing as well, just to ensure that everybody was doing those rounds, making sure inmates had their 3 meals, making sure everybody behaved. Now, does that go accordingly? No, it doesn't go that way. We have many stories about that. What happens in special housing and in those units? But it's nothing like in the movies. No, nobody's in the dark. You do have, like we do have, give you as much as we can. We just we curtail certain things that are your privileges that you have in prison. That is really what is happening when you go in there. And you can be in there anywhere between 30 to 60 days. We try not to keep them at a very long period of time because it is small. Okay, I'm not saying, and I personally sometimes was like, wow, I don't know how they do this. Because some guys just wanted to remain in there and they liked it in there because they didn't have to deal with anybody else. Some people didn't want to deal with nobody else.
Oh,
And
I
I
can.
can understand it. But I didn't understand. But we were like, this is not good for your mental health. So we got to get you out of here.
Right.
We got to get you out of here.
It's not
And
meant for a permanent fix. It's meant for a
no,
temporary fix or punishment or whatever words you want to use for that person.
it is.
It's not.
It is. It is a form of punishment.
Mhm.
Okay, it is a form of punishment. I'm not going to say it's not. It's a form of punishment, because it's like anything else. Society, our punishment is going to prison. And the thing about prison, my prison is nothing but a
Yep.
microcosm of society. And that's all it is. We've taken society and put it in this little area, and everything is there. Yes, some privilege curtail, yes, but there's other ones that we don't get, we don't take away.
Oh, you know what
They're
you just said? You said the microcosm of society. I guess that could be one of the myths because we always go, oh, you think of prisoners and they're different from people in society. No, it's just a bunch of people in society who haven't been caught and gone to prison. There's
yes.
a lot of good people that break laws every day. And I don't mean like shoplifting, but there's always somebody doing something. And in prison, you got the same people. You have hot tempered people. You have people who are calm. You have people who are violent. You have people who are sexist. You have people who are racist. You have people who are really good people and they just screwed up. It's a lot. It's not just a paintbrush where you can just paint every person in prison with that same stroke, right?
No, you can't. Everybody is so is very different. You have some really good people, and some people are just that I was like, wow, he never needs to go back in the street. He never should ever, never go back to the street.
Right.
But there's some other people, that that wow, how did you land here? That was usually a question that I had, and I would ask. I asked was this young man one time, and we were
Wait, hold
having
on.
a conversation.
Well, because I don't want to get too far from the myth segment. Can you
Okay.
tell me what's your, and I don't want to save it like if we're talking about something that's fun, but we got to make light sometimes. We don't want to just be here Debbie Downing for an hour. We'll ask different level. What's the funniest prison myth that you know of that you just hear it and it just makes you laugh?
Oh, that they think that the officers don't know what they're doing. They're ignorant. That's one of the biggest myths for us. They see the movie, they see this guy that he just don't know what they're doing, or then they go see what is that movie I'm trying to think about, the airplane movie,
They
and
do that with a lot of. They do that with
Nicolas Cage in it.
Yeah. Oh God. I think every movie they just, every how many action movies you're just watching the bumbling cops piling up in the car crashes and they can't aim and it's just always something, right?
and, and it's not like that. But I was watching. I was thinking about the Nicolas Cage movie. I'm trying to think the name of it. I can't come. Con Air. And I
Yeah.
was like, I've been in Con Air. That is actually the airplane, but it's nothing like that. The system is very different. That opportunity will never ever happen. Some of the things that you watch on TV and movies, there's nothing like that. I remember watching Oz on HBO, and I
Oh, come
was
on,
like,
don't hurt Oz. That was I used to love
"Oh, I
Oz.
loved it! I
Oh,
thought it
man.
was a great show. I loved the show, but I was like, no, prison is not like that. It's nothing like that."
Those
And I love the
producers had a lot
show.
of say so in Oz. They had a lot of power in Oz for some reason.
Yeah, it's nothing like that. But there are things that do happen in prison. It really depends where you at. Uh, Penitentiaries are pretty rough. Federal penitentiaries are not a very very rough place to be at.
Mhm.
Controlling the gangs and dealing with different people. That is usually the biggest and the hardest job of the officer
How,
is to be able to
how
control that.
how hard is that to keep gangs separated? Like,
It's a hard job. We have dedicated people to that. We have a whole unit that's dedicated to be able to maintain and track all them inmates with different gangs, and we do have a special, even a special unit to when they want to come out of gangs. We deal with that as well. So that's big, it's a big problem
is
in
this?
controlling it.
Oh, I'm sorry. Is this a part of the myth of the movies? Because you've seen in movies or prison TV shows where you have these gangs that are in prison. There's always somebody who's in charge, right, of those gangs. You know who the person is who's in charge, and when there's big problems, you go and meet with the leaders of the gangs and kind of talk stuff out.
Honestly, it's not a myth. You do have those groupings. You do have somebody's in charge of a group, and we kind of like that because it's a lot easier for us to have one person that we can deal with than several people at one time. And
Mhm.
having that, because it's always going to break down in gangs, whether it is uh, based on color, creed, or race, or whatever, they're going to break down in gangs. And we usually have somebody that's running a group that we can talk to. The Italians, you usually know there's somebody going to be in charge. You have the Crips, the Bloods, the Hell Angels, the um, Disciples, and the the La Trece, the 13, the MS 13. We have all of them, and there's always somebody that's in charge of those groups. We try to find out who's in charge so we can have those conversations sometimes. They
Right.
are needed for me as a lieutenant. I needed to know who they were so I can have those conversations and make sure that the prison ran smooth.
Like,
Nine
hey,
times out of 10,
oh, go ahead.
everybody wants the prison to run smooth because when it doesn't, it's
Right.
an issue for
It's an
us and it's an issue for them.
Yeah, it's anarchy for them too. People think, well, it's not like the movies. They're not trying. Prisoners aren't trying to plan a riot every day of the every day of the week. The movies are over sensationalized. Is knowing those leaders a part of when something does happen? You can come to those leaders and say, hey, look, I know this happened, but we need to make sure this doesn't get out of hand. Is that kind of where you're coming from? Like, uh,
It,
you
it,
know,
it, it worked that way sometimes, and sometimes we just knew, I
let's
know
be
this
prepared for
happened.
what's going to happen.
The you're the first one I'm going to go and pick up if something wrong happens, and I will let them know this happens wrong. This we already have a
Mhm.
notification throughout some other people that this is about to happen. If this does happen, you're the first one I'm going to come and pick up and lock up. Oh, I don't
What's
want.
mhm.
And lock up is we going to put them in the special housing unit, and we're going to take privileges away. We are going to be able to so we can curtail the situation before it gets out of hand. And a lot of times they don't want that. They like their little life. They want to keep that what they have going on. They don't want big changes. They don't like big changes. Because once
You're
a
right.
change comes, they don't want that.
I mean, you're already in prison. If I get people, when you're outside, you don't get those things. I could turn on the TV anytime I want, but those times for you in prison are cherishable. You're in prison already, so you want to take away my TV time? That's a big thing. Yeah,
Yes,
that's
it is a big thing when we take TV time. When we take the radios away, it's a big thing. Usually,
that.
that's your communication. You're not listening. You have to borrow a radio. You don't want that. You don't want to lose what you have, and most of them don't want to lose it.
Is that when it starts happening to where the prisoners are policing the other prisoners because they don't want to lose certain things? Like, hey, man, you tripping? You about to mess up something for us?
Uh, a lot of times they do. A lot of
Hmm.
times they do. Then you got other guys that might tell you, "Well, you're the police. You're the law enforcement. You take care of it."
Hmm.
Well, and a lot of them realize, well, we have to curtail ourselves because if not, when we come in and do it, it just a lot of people going to lose more than what they wanted to lose, and they'll lose their privileges, and it's just the changes that they don't want to happen, so
I
they're
got
not going that way.
I got that idea because my roommate that I was telling you about, my ex roommate back in Florida, told me that one day. That's where I got the TV thing from, because he was trying to get the inmates to police something, and they were like, basically, you do it. He says, look, if you don't do it, you get your TV time. When I get off, I'm going to watch TV. So he told me that's what he told the guy, and then they went and policed up their own person and got that handle. So that's where I got that from. Um,
Yeah, and that's how it does happen. I had um a- as a counselor, funny stories is just I
mhm,
had a big guy. I had a guy that worked for me. He was huge.
mhm,
And he was big because this guy is 6'7", 300 pounds.
mm,
And I mean, he's 300 pounds, not a fat. He's 300 pounds of solid muscle. 6'7", he could have been a linebacker just for any professional football team at some point in time. But being that he took that route, he was actually a gang member. He done a lot of things. He came and he really was trying to change a lot of his life and try to change for the best for his son. He had a son that was doing very well, also big guy. He great genetics, and he was playing football and he was trying to make sure his son did everything that he didn't get to do. So when he came into me in my unit, I said, I read his file. I said, I know who you are, what you've done. I do need somebody in the unit, just to is help me police some certain things and talk to these guys in ways that I can't talk to. I can't relate to everybody. I might be able to relate to some, but I can't. I'm on the other side of the wall. I'm law enforcement. I'm the guy that's going to, put the hammer down and then take stuff away. But I need somebody to be, my go-to that can talk to these folks. And I think you'd be the one. You coming in. A lot of guys are going to respect you. I respect you. I think we respect each other, and we created a lot of respect between one another. And I helped him out a lot. Funny story with him was he always had this. He's a big guy. He's dark skinned. He got this mean mug about him. So every 6 months we get together with the inmates to evaluate them and what they're doing right, what they're doing wrong, are they in programs. So, and I had spoken to him, and I wouldn't know he was doing everything possibly, and everything that he needed to be doing, he was doing it. But he's a big guy. He sits in his chair with his knees almost coming up to his shoulders. He's 6'7". So when he sits down, he takes a lot of room. And he comes in, he start mean mugging the people that's there. He's just mean mugging, and he gonna talk. And all of a sudden, I'd say, let's take a time out before we even get started. And I pointed at him, said, come on, stand up, get outside to this door. And I talked to him, and I talk to him and point him in the chest. And I'm poking this guy, and I'm looking at him. He's huge, and I'm poking him in his chest. He's way taller than I am. And I told him what he needed to do. Stop doing what you're doing right now. These people are going to really help you. Go in there and act like a good human being, like you need to. Don't go in there. You mean mugger, you doing this, blah, blah. And I just berated him out in the hallway. And he looked at me, and here he is looking at me like, you're right, Mr. Lugo. All right, let's go. He sat down, had a smile on his face. His whole demeanor changed. And he was like, what happened here? And he got what he wanted. He got what he needed. He was like, when we got outside, well, that worked out like it never worked. I said, well, yeah, you come in expecting one thing. That's what you're going to get. You can't, your trend of thought has to change. You got to expect good to get good. If you come in expecting that you're going to get all this bad stuff that you've always gotten, nothing is going to change. That's what I told him, and it did work out for him.
That goes back to that conditioning. No, you're doing a job that, it's just like, military, just like the job I have now. And I tell people all the time, there's jobs, there's careers, but there's also jobs you have to have passionate about and want to make change. If you're here just because it's a paycheck, it's not the type of person I need to hire. Is that how you feel with the people that you were in charge of when you were supervising? Hey, you're here to do a job, but you're also here to care about that job. You're not just here because on a certain day we give you a paycheck.
Well, unfortunately, just like any job, you have some people that's all they come for. What we call you do 8 and hit the gate, and nothing else matters.
8 hit the gate.
Hate and hit the gate. But a lot of people that I noticed that kind of came in also, they realized after a while you are their mentors, whether you want to or not. You are the people they're going to relate to. You are the people they're going to look forward to, what to create an image of who a person should be. So you have to think about when you come into this type of job. People are going to look at you a little bit different. You are, whether you want to or not be, you are what you and I will call my brother's keeper. Mm-hmm. Whether you like it or not, you are. This is your job right now. And the image you're projecting should be one of that people want to, I don't know, how can I say that?
Because he used to tell me that he could feel the difference when he worked with different officers on different shifts. You could tell not relaxation till we can do whatever we want, but when certain groups of inmates saw certain officers, there was a respect level there. They knew everything was going to be dress on the up and up. There was not going to be any BS, no extracurriculars. all that stuff. And then when they knew certain other people came in, it's like, oh, here's this guy. He's on shift.
Yes, and that happens. Some people are like, even the officer with some people working that you want to work with, you're like, oh my God. So now we got to be on our P's and Q's because this guy comes in and we've had officers like that. They come in, they have a chip on their shoulder, they feel like that they forget that the people we're dealing with are human beings.
Mm-hmm.
And they treat them in ways that you shouldn't be treating people as. I don't care where you at. Our job, I used to make sure that I told them, listen, our job here is to maintain safety and security, maintain these people online, have to give them what they got coming, okay, and treat them as humans. There are nothing else. Even though it don't matter what the attitude they're giving you or how they acting, your attitude still have to be above theirs. You got to think about who you are and what you represent. And if you can't do that job correctly, you are in the wrong place. You are in the wrong job. And that is one thing that a lot of people didn't realize. A lot of other people did. And it really depends where you come from. Because if you're in a penitentiary, I will tell you that is a different way of thinking. Because you look at prisoners and you see these guys that are constantly fighting. When you see this, I've seen inmates what they can do. I've seen inmates how they can cut, stab each other, fight. I've seen inmates. I walked into a room and it looks like Carrie just happened. He's, bathed in blood from the top of his head down to his toes. And that's impressionable. And if you see that every day constantly, your mind works different. If you're an officer, if you're an inmate, it doesn't matter. So the way you start looking at the inmates is totally different. But we have to make that difference. If not, we're no better than those coming into the system.
We talked about identifying those guys that are in charge of certain sects. How much does seniority play? Because again, we get that from the movies. Just because someone's been in prison for 30 years, everyone's listening to him and respecting him or her. How much does seniority play into that hierarchy?
For the officers, for the inmates, it doesn't play. It really doesn't. It really matters on the person and how well they behave. It has nothing to do because I've seen inmates that's been in prison for many, many years and they have no respect from the other inmates. So it usually doesn't happen. It's their behavior, who they are, or it's a lot of times if we're talking about gangs and who they were on the streets, a lot of times that makes a big difference. Also, different skill sets. Some people have and I say skill sets because some people can talk other people into just doing anything. I don't care. That's one thing. Some people might think that's a myth about people, but I've seen inmates that are just have that gift of gab, and they are so good at it, and they can sell, popsicle sticks to Alaskans. So they're really, really good into talking people into different things and how they get around. And those are really good. And they just had gone, and I tell them when I start listening to them, I say, well, you know what, you're really good at this is just the way you've gone about your life. You use your hustling skills in the wrong way. You ended up in prison. You could have done this.
They always say that if you spent the amount of energy you did doing, the things that you're doing, you could be, you hear that all the time, and something you were saying earlier about some people, all they need is that one experience. And I've never been to prison, of course. I went to jail one time and that was enough for me. And I knew I never was going to end up in prison. It was for speeding. I was going almost 30 something miles over the speed limit because I was tired. It was 2 a.m. I had been driving 9 hours and home was about another 15 miles and all I saw was a bed. So, and this was on base. This was on Fort Stewart, Georgia. So I'm speeding down the back road. I get pulled over. They arrest me. They put the cuffs on. They tell me to get in the back seat. I can't get in the back seat. And the officer's just looking at me. He's like, what's the problem? I said, and me, my smart mouth, Pedro. I said, well, contrary to belief, we haven't all done this. can you help me get in the car? So he helped me get in the car because he's just like, get in the car. I don't want to get in the car with cuffs on behind me. So we get in the car, and then we get to the jail, and he takes my shoes. He's like, give me your belt. I was like, my belt? He's like, yeah, we have to take your belt, because people do. I was like, it's a speeding ticket. Oh, I commit suicide for a speed, but they got to take the stuff. So they took all the stuff. It's cold as hell. I didn't know an air conditioner could go to -80. It was cold. I fell asleep. When I wake up, my platoon sergeant walks, and I woke up to him laughing at me. And I was like, this sucks. Get me out of here. And that was my experience. I was like, yeah, I'm never going to jail or prison or anything. And that was nothing. And I was
yeah. That was quick, but yeah, that's one thing we do. As soon as you get into prison, we do. It's even on special house when we get you in the special housing unit. We do take your shoes, we do take everything, we change clothes, we get everything away from you. But in jail, yeah, that's one of the things they do immediately. That's just they have to do it, regardless of what you're there for,
right?
Because they never know the mental health of that person. And they have to deal with some situations later on. They'd be like, "Oh my God, didn't you just?" Well, instead of treating one person for this and one person, they just treat everybody the same. Right. That way, they don't have to worry about it. And talking about cold, and you remind me, I had a guy that was really, really. We were in the special housing unit, and we have one room for whatever reason is always cold. When we brought him in, it was not because we made it cold. It just happened to be that this was the coldest room in the special housing unit, and we used it when we used it always as a receiving room to do what we had to do when you came into special housing unit. And I knew for a fact it was cold. So I had one inmate that's outside for recreation. It was time to come in, and everybody's coming in. He says, "I'm not going back in." And he kind of expected me to put a team together, go and drag him out. He wanted to fight. He wanted to do all this other stuff. I said, "Don't worry about it. You can stay out here. No problem. I am not going to fight you for this. You can have this out here. I am not going to, I just make sure we did watch him. We were watching him every 30 minutes. I even put a camera out there just to make sure that we had evidence that this guy was not being harmed. Nothing was going on. He just didn't want to come out, and we were not going to just go out of our way to just fight him because that's what he wanted. So it began to rain, and it began to rain pretty hard. I covered the camera, and he's still out there. He finally said, "Well, can I come inside?" "Oh yeah, you can come inside." He was already wet, so instead of taking him immediately to the cell, I put him in that very cold room for the next few hours. And I was supposed to have left a few hours before, but I stayed around, and I waited until I looked at him, and he's just shivering. He said, "I'm cold." I said, "We're going to have this conversation ever again?" "No, we're not." So I got him a change of clothes. He could make it back. I never, ever had an issue from him. He was like, "Wow, I can't believe you did that." And I saw him a few months later, a couple of years later, and he said, "I never forgot that you did to me. That kind of changed my idea of doing some of the things. I expected you to come in and try to fight me and do all this, and you just gave me a whole new perspective." I said, "No, I don't have to fight you.
I've got my methods. I don't have to sit here and get a knockdown fight with you." No. Everybody that was watching, thank you for watching the On the Count podcast. I just stole Pedro's exiting parties, so I just walked all over. I'm sorry, Pedro, but I wanted to let you all know we're going to have several guests this year. Ex-law enforcement, current. We try to get ex-law enforcement and people who are ex-cons because they talk a little more freer. When you're actively in, there's certain things you can't talk about and certain things you can talk about. And we want to be as expressive and free as we can. So we try to get we've got a lot of guests on the calendar. It's just when they come up, we'll let you know ahead of time when we're promoting certain guests like we had last week. And this is going to be a really good podcast and webcast on Keone Productions. Pedro, I want you to tell everybody again why this particular topic is a passionate topic for you and where you want this show to go, and then you can see everybody out today.
All right. the thing that really got me is that everybody has a story to tell. And there are many stories of those that are in prison that come out and succeed, they get lost and out there. Nobody really tells them. Nobody knows about them. Because what we get to hear are the stories of those that are doing wrong, which is a very small percentage of those. There's a lot of people go back into the system, but there's really a small percentage that really are out here doing wrong again. A lot of them want to succeed. I want to talk about those success stories, present them. I also want to talk to those that have worked in the prison. What are they doing now? Well, I want to hear some of those stories because I know everybody out there want to hear some of the stories we lived through being in prison, because there are so many. But there are also a lot of just other subjects. We started with prison reform because a lot of us want to see some prison reform. We want to see some changes in the system. We want to make it better. We want to make our society better. We want those that come out after, because it's punishment. Prison is punishment, but it's also corrective. That is why they call correctional institution. There's a reason why it's called correctional institution, to correct behavior, bring them back to society. So I am passionate about that. I've seen the change that is possible when we all come together and we put our heads together, and the thought is there of positivity and being able to help and assist those that need assistance. And that is why I'm passionate about it. And I'm hoping to be able to bring a lot of great guests in the upcoming episodes. We got some people that we really want to bring. We'll talk about that. And we'll also have both conversations from both sides. Maybe I can sit an inmate and a staff warden, and we're going to have those conversations. They're probably a little bit tougher, but now we can have them that we couldn't have before. That is my goal. And I hope to be able to bring that to life and present it on this podcast. That is what I have.
We'll see you next Wednesday, every Wednesday, 3 p.m. on the count.
On the count. Good.